What's going on, everyone? Steven here from TechMaker. In this episode, I want to show you something kind of interesting that I came across the other day. This is a token that was launched by a malicious developer, and they actually managed to steal about 300 Ethereum from several hundred people. And I think this is pretty interesting. I actually was asked by a friend about this on a tip, and I put a couple $100 into it after looking at the code a little bit, but not carefully enough. And within just a couple of hours, I realized something was fishy. So I started digging into it, and sure enough, turns out it's totally malicious, and it's kind of it's a different exploit than I have seen before. It's sort of like it's almost a reverse rug pull or something like that. So in this episode, what I want to do is show you exactly how it happened. How it like the circumstances around it that allowed this to happen, and what to look out for, and kind of look at the code and see exactly how it works. So anyway, with all of that said, let's dig into the details. So the best I can tell, this all started with this tweet from Andre Cronje, who's the founder of Yearn, and he basically just tweets out Cozy Finance. And you can see there's like a platform launching or something like that. And so this got a lot of people speculating that there's going to be a token for Cozy that had not been fully released or talked about yet. And so there's people like my friend who dig through Etherscan looking for opportunities. And so he, I guess, had seen a big wallet who had accumulated some of a token called Cozy Finance and assumed, hey, there's something going on here. So this is kind of the initial start of how this happened. So me being me, the first thing I do when I hear about this is actually go try to look at the contract to look who owns this token. And you can see here that we've got the Yearn deployer, which has, basically over half of the supply here. We have a burn address. We've got a bunch of addresses, some named Ether accounts, so on and so forth. And there were 400 holders. Maybe there were a little less when I encountered this, but there were hundreds of holders at the time. And this is kind of where we started digging into it. So being a holder doesn't necessarily mean anything, because it's like the thing with Shiba. You could send Vitalik half the tokens, and so technically Vitalik could be a holder. This is something people do a lot when they talk about, oh, Mark Cuban is holding this token. Well, sure, but somebody could have just sent it to that address, and he's not willing for that or whatever. So what's interesting is to look at who created the contract. So that's kind of where I started digging into it. So if you go to the actual contract for the token, which I have open here in this tab, and we go to the very, very last transaction, if we click on all the transactions here and go to the last, maybe it's already here, we have contract creation. And so we can look at this transaction, and I think, hold on, no, let's go back. I want to see the actual transaction for the contract creation, and we're going to see who created it. And it was this 0xDBA so on address. So we'll go ahead and open this in a new tab really quick. Okay, so we'll come back to the contract in a second, to this transaction and to the actual contract. First of all, let's look at this address. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on since this all happened, so I haven't had time to investigate. If anybody's interested, this is a malicious account. So if you want to look around and see what they're up to and do some investigating, that's cool. It's a fun thing to do. Not much you can do about it most of the time, but in any case, it's interesting. So sorry, I'm scrolling so much. I want to see the full list of 400 transactions and go here. So their first ever action was to create that contract. Then they approved that token on Uniswap, I assume. And then they added liquidity. And the interesting thing is, let's look at this. So This is why I said this is kind of a reverse rug pull. So they added 400,000 cozy tokens with 99 ether. So they put almost $200,000, or at the time maybe $200,000, into this contract. Normally with a rug pull, what you would see happen is some sort of liquidity incentive program where you have some token, and then you've got like Ethereum, and they're saying we're going to incentivize this liquidity pool. And so people come in and they start putting in like tons and tons of Ethereum into this liquidity pool, potentially millions of dollars worth of Ethereum. And then whoever created the token is either holding a massive bag of the token that's unreleased, or they have the ability to mint more or something like that. And then because of the way that DEXs work, they can like just come in and swap all of their huge stack of their custom tokens for the liquidity that's been added to the ether side and just drain the ether. So that's how you would expect a rug pull to work. So typically maybe they start the liquidity pool with a little bit of ether and then their custom token, and then they're incentivizing, they're saying we're going to give rewards or this or that. They build up a huge liquidity, and then they print more money or whatever, insert that, and then just drain the Ethereum or the Chainlink or whatever it is on the other side, Matic or whatever. So basically what these guys did is they put 400 million, I think I said 400,000 earlier, 400 million COs in with 100 Ethereum. So in my kind of quick look at this the other day before I threw a couple $100 at it, basically what I was thinking was, these guys are putting $200,000 at risk here because they're putting that into the liquidity thing, and it's on Uniswap. You can go trade it, so on and so forth. And maybe there's more to this that I could have thought through, but in my mind, it's like, this might be real because, these guys are actually putting something at risk, because through impermanent loss or whatever, if the price of the token cratered, they could lose a bunch of money theoretically. So it seemed kind of legitimate. And then you have the fact of like, okay, you've got the Yearn deployer holding some, and so on and so forth. It was minted to the Yearn deployer. Admittedly, splitting all these up into 40,000 or 40 million transactions like this seemed weird. I don't know why anybody would do that, but whatever. I kind of was like, I don't know, maybe they have a reason. And you can see that happening here. We'll look at the actual code here in a second. But the other interesting thing, if we look at the internal transactions on this address, because my next question was like, okay, well, where did the 100 or 99 ether come from? So if we go, where am I at here? If we go to, where is the account? Here we go. Maybe let's just click on this. That's it. So if we look at the internal transactions and we go to the very last one, where am I looking? There's a lot of stuff coming from Uniswap here. How do I, view all. Here we go. Okay, cool. So I want to go to the very last thing. So you can see here that we got 100 ETH basically almost coming from tornado.cash. And if you're not familiar with tornado.cash, basically, without going too much into it, it's a way to allow for private transactions. So if you want to obscure who you are even more, you can use Tornado. So you can piece together a narrative that's like, okay, we got somebody who's trying to discreetly launch this contract. Okay, maybe it's the project and they just don't want to give anybody, a red flag ahead of time saying, hey, buy this thing or whatever, right? Maybe they're trying to do like a soft launch or something. Who knows? Like, you could kind of piece together different narratives about why they may hide their identity and so on. So with all of that information and kind of the time crunch, I was like, you know what, let's just put a little bit in there. And I think some other people on a thread did a little bit. Okay, so then I saw a tweet from somebody saying, hey, have you tried to actually sell it back? Because you can't sell your co's back, which was weird because there's all this liquidity. And that is the scam. So let's take a look at exactly how that works. So if we go back to the actual contract here, let's click on the contract address. So what I did whenever I was researching this, basically so far we've got that, you've got the tweet coming out about Cozy Finance. You've got a new contract called Cozy Finance that has $200,000 worth of Ethereum and 400 million tokens in a liquidity pool. And which, as we've already discussed, like in my mind signified like this is real because people are putting real money at risk here. And we've got, some involvement, it looks like, from Yearn. Anybody can send money to those addresses, but it's, coded into the contract and all this kind of stuff, right? Okay, so all that signal, looks like it could be real. Okay, so here's the code. So if you're a Solidity developer, you're going to scan through this and go, okay, like a lot of this looks pretty normal. You got Safe Math here, which is an Open Zeppelin library. We've got a library for addresses. We've got a bunch of stuff about function calls. So I kind of skimmed past that a little bit, which again, I wasn't doing a real audit. I was looking at this going like, okay, could this be real? Is there anything obvious in here? Which is a mistake I won't make twice. Because obviously no hacker is going to label a function name like, steal money or whatever. So, but then you've got the interface, i.e. ERC20, all of that looks totally normal. We've got the contract for Cozy Finance, Safe Math, address, so on and so forth. We got some stuff here about allowances, name, We've got the Uniswap router here. Okay, we got all these mint calls, which, again, it's weird, but maybe they had some reason for doing it. They're minting this to the Yearn deployer contract, I believe. Thinking back now from a major project, I have a very hard time seeing them hard coding this in here, so that's going to be a red flag for me going forward. Kind of all standard looking stuff, right? And so you come down here and you see transfer, and you've got this approved check thing. So all of this looks like it could have just come from Open Zeppelin, right? So I kind of skimmed down like this, transfer from, and we've got approved check, approve, all that looks good. And I didn't really go too much past that. I just kind of said, okay, it's ERC20, no big deal, right? Wrong. So as I said, what happened whenever I was trying to, I don't know if I said this exactly, but whenever I was trying to go back and swap out some of it on Uniswap, I got some error message that said, I think it was something like transfer, there's not enough balance. ERC20 transfer amount exceeds balance. And so this was basically firing whenever I was trying to transfer the token. And okay, that's weird because I clearly had a balance until you come down here and you look at this function approve check. So again, like all of this is written in a way where it's not obvious exactly what's going on. Like it's not going to say steal money here, So I've got approve check, which looks like, okay, don't allow this from the 0 address. There's this before token transfer, I think, is actually part of Open Zeppelin. And then we're actually going ahead and doing the transfer here. So we're just updating the balances and then we're emitting a transfer event. The thing that's bizarre, and this is where the exploit really is that we have this burn token check modifier. So you read that and you kind of have some idea of what that might do, but you would be wrong. So if you scroll down here, you have this modifier burn token check, which looks like a giant mess of code, which I assume is on purpose so that you can't easily read it and understand what the heck is going on. It's also at the very, very end of the code here. And, so I skimmed this and I did not catch this initially because, you assume if you look at this like, okay, we've got a token here. Somebody's put $200,000 of funding into this thing and it's just a normal token. You think, okay, this looks like there's something real here because these people are putting their money at risk in theory. So that's really the trick, is these people were not putting their money at risk. And I'll show you exactly how that works. But part of looking at this and trying to figure out what the heck is going on is untangling the mess so that we can look at it. So I went ahead and opened this up in my code editor here. And now we can see a little bit better what's going on. So basically the way a modifier works in Solidity, if we go back over here and scroll up, you can see basically you have this approve check function, and then you have this modifier applied to it. So what happens is you pass the arguments along through the modifier, and then whatever happens in the modifier will either stop the execution or continue whenever there's an underscore. So here's what I mean. So right here, basically we have if owner da 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 da, and then we set something here, and then we do underscore. So it's like we're gonna make safe owner the recipient, and then we're gonna do whatever that function says to do. Okay, so I'm not gonna explain every single aspect of this because first of all, I haven't studied the contract in enough detail to tell you, every single aspect of it yet. But here's the interesting part. So the first thing is like, okay, if the owner is the safe owner and the sender is the owner. So if the person sending the transaction is the owner of the contract, which we can see if we come up here to the very top. Sorry, that was a lot of scrolling there. If we come up to the top, this owner concept is something that gets used a lot in Solidity if you haven't seen it before. Basically, people will say like, if I deploy the contract, make me the owner, you store the address in this owner variable, and then that lets you say, okay, only let me do, certain functions. It's a security mechanism. So anyway, we got the owner of the contract there. And so here we're saying, okay, I don't quite know what the safe owner thing is about. It doesn't really matter too much for our purposes. But we're saying if the sender is the owner, set this safe owner to be the recipient, and then continue on. I guess they're wanting to make sure that the safe owner always receives the money or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Then we have if sender is owner, or the sender is the safe owner, or the recipient is the owner. Blah, blah, blah. Sell amount is amount. Continue on. Okay, fine. Basically, we're going to just ignore this because this is some kind of internal trick they were trying to do. I don't know exactly what that's about. The real meat of it is like, okay, so if you bought this token on Uniswap, you're not the owner or the safe owner, so you can ignore all of this if at the top. So you're by default down here in the else, okay? You're not the owner, you're not the safe owner, and you're probably not sending the tokens back to the owner, okay? So you can ignore this if, all of this. So basically everybody who bought the token is down here in this else, right? So we have this white addresses and black addresses thing, okay? So essentially what you can see this as is, okay, if your address has been whitelisted, which in all likelihood is not the case, continue on. So you're allowed to send, right? Else if black addresses of the sender is true, require sender, blah, blah, blah. And so basically it looks like we're saying only allow the sender to be the safe owner or the recipient to be the Uniswap router. And this is the error that I was getting. Okay. So my understanding here is basically like, if you are not whitelisted, you cannot send the money anywhere unless maybe you're sending it to the Uniswap router. I didn't try to add liquidity, but basically maybe you're allowed to add liquidity or something like that, but that's about all you're able to do. So everybody who tried to go and trade their tokens, their what was this called, COS tokens, everybody was getting this error. Not directly from Uniswap. You were getting like some kind of something happened, you can't sell these tokens. So I went and I tried to just transfer the tokens from one of my addresses to another one of my addresses, and I got this ERC20 transfer amount exceeds balance, which clued me into the fact that I needed to go dig in deeper to the contract. So you could probably spend some time kind of digging into why we have all these conditionals here. The truth is, like, maybe there's a reason for all of them, and maybe a lot of it's just like nonsense. Like, honestly, like whenever you see all these if, else, if, else, blah, 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 like probably there's some duplicated logic in here. I haven't gone through it all, but it's a little bit hard to follow, but I think that's part of the problem. You know, people who are trying to do this stuff aren't trying to write clean code. They're trying to actually trick you. So writing stuff that's very complicated is part of that, I think. So anyway, let's go look at one more transaction. So right about the time I was discovering this, if we go back over to the address, where was it? If I click back here, will I get on the address? Yeah, so this is the address, I think, 0xD, so on and so forth. Transactions, 408 transactions. Let's go to the last, because so we have the contract creation here. We've got add liquidity here with 99 Ether, and then, what was that, about 12 hours go by? So they put 100 Ether in. And then here we remove liquidity, and you can see here that basically we're pulling out 424 Ether. So they're telling me that's $811,000. So they put in about 200K and they pulled out $811,000 like 12 or 13 hours later. And you can see that they basically sold 300 million of the tokens that they put in there. So essentially what they did, to boil it all down, is they put liquidity in so that you could buy. They kind of did it in this, I mean, honestly, these people, I mean, in a sort of technical sense, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but they kind of didn't do anything wrong. They just put out a contract, and people, because of the Twitterverse and so on and so forth, were looking for this. They thought they found it. It looks real. It looks like somebody's putting in $200,000 of liquidity to maybe bootstrap the liquidity or something like that. And so people start buying it, and you think to yourself like, oh, I'm buying this token at a super cheap price, so I'm just going to hold it. Maybe it'll go up, maybe it won't. And in my mind at the time, I'm like, even if this isn't real, like it could be the case that like it's going to pump for whatever reason and I'll make a little bit of money. Like, I mean, that's kind of a bad way to think. In a way, it's part of the crypto verse, but like, it is what it is. You're kind of like, oh, maybe I'm going to catch a wave early or something like that. So that's kind of what's going on in your head. And then, so you're not actually thinking about selling it. So you buy this thing, you see that other people are buying it. You see that, the available tokens are going down or whatever, right? So, it wasn't until I saw a tweet somebody said, because I was like looking for the hashtag $COZ, and then one of the most recent things was like, hey, I tried to sell it and I can't. So, yeah, that's kind of what happened here. So I said it's a reverse rug pull, and it kind of is. Like, basically you lure people into a trap because there's no way out. But what happens is because people are buying, essentially the price on Uniswap continues to go up because there's no way to sell it. So it's like everybody's a hodler. So the price keeps going up. People keep buying more and more of the supply. And all these people have to do is remove their liquidity. They don't have to do any fancy rug pull stuff. They just take out their own liquidity, which because people are buying it is just giving them more and more ether. So it's clever. There may have been other people do this before. I haven't seen it personally. If you got any other links to interesting situations, be sure to leave it down in the comments. But yeah, I thought this was kind of a bizarre thing, and I wanted to go ahead and kind of talk you through how it worked. Hopefully you'll know to look out for this kind of stuff in the future. And anyway, if you enjoyed this kind of content, be sure to leave a comment and let me know. This is the first time I've made a video in this fashion, so I'd be interested to know what you think. With that said, if you like this kind of content, or you like programming content about crypto, Web3, that sort of stuff, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.